Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. Yeah, I just wanted to do this short little video on the rally, the final rally, the final blow, as it were, in the Trump campaign for the office of president in 2024 at Madison Square Garden that took place a little over a week ago. This was Trump's last ditch effort to appeal to his city, his home state, his home city, New York, to try to get them to vote for him. Well, I think it's a losing effort. Um, you know, it's just like Kamala Harris. She went to Houston, in Texas. People will say, well, Houston is a majority Republican city. They're going to vote Republican regardless. Same thing could be said of New York, especially New York City. Not so much the entire state, but the city where the population centers are majority Democrat, so they're going to vote for it. But at the Trump rally, it was a spectacle. It was like at the Kamala Harris rally in Texas, at least what's going on, you had um, several celebrities. Kelly Rowland gave a tremendous speech. Beyonce spoke. But at the Trump rally, like a night or two after in New York, it was completely a spectacle. It was Hulk Hogan was there, Dr. Phil was there, the My Pillow guy Mike Lindell was there, um, RFK was there. Like they brought out all the stops. And also, somebody who was there was Tony Hinchcliffe. Now, many people don't know who Tony Hinchcliffe is. He is an insult comic. He's heavily featured on the Joe Rogan Experience show. He's one of Joe Rogan's clique. Joe Rogan has a series of comedians that came up with him in LA during the time he came up that he often brings on the show. And from that, Tony um, veered off into his own podcast with the Kill Tony podcast, in which it's like a roast. He'll bring a celebrity on and he'll roast them. He'll say politically incorrect comedy, and he will, insult people. He's known for his racist humor. He made a joke many years ago about black people eating watermelons and about Palestinians playing rock, paper, scissors. So he's done this type of stuff before. Okay? But what he does at this event is he says a joke about Puerto Rico. He says there's a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Now, that joke was preceded by a different joke that he made about Latino immigrants, where he goes, "Oh, when Latino immigrants come across the border, I put my hands up. I go like this, don't come, don't come." And he's pantomiming, don't about the Latino immigrants. So it's like a double shot. So upon hearing this, the Trump campaign immediately distanced themselves from him. Right? They said that they denounced his statements. But I have to ask this: if I'm the Trump people, why was he even allowed to speak? Like, the type of comedy he does, the type of irreverent, racist, bigoted. Okay, people say, "Oh, it's comedy. What do you want?" Like you're being woke. You're being too uptight. It's just comedy. Yes, but does comedy belong? Does insult comedy belong at a presidential campaign? Does comedy even belong at a presidential campaign? This is serious. Like this isn't a joke. You know what I'm saying? Like There's a lot of comedians that are on the left, but you don't see Kamala Harris bringing out comedians. Okay, Vivek Ramaswamy pointed out that she brought out George Lopez, and George Lopez said, "Oh, the Trump says he wants to build the wall, but he better hide the tools because the tools will end up stolen by other Mexicans." But here's the thing: that George Lopez is Mexican. You know what I mean? And it could be argued that George Lopez's comedy doesn't even belong there either. The thing is, comedy doesn't belong at a presidential rally. Not this type of comedy. Okay, there have been presidents that have been witty, and the presidents that have been funny. Like, for example, Ronald Reagan was a very funny president. You know what I mean? But he wasn't insulting entire groups of people. Like, you can do whatever you want when it comes to comedy, but when you have his type of comedy, hey Lisa, what's going on? The type of comedy that he does is no place in politics for that. You know what I mean? It's serious. You know what I mean? What I saw from this whole thing was farcical. Like, it was completely farcical. It made a complete joke of the political process. And then Tim Walz comes out and he says, vice presidential nominee, that he's a dipshit and he's a jerkwad, the guy Hinchcliffe, right? And then President Biden chimes in and he says that the Trump voters, the Trump supporters, they're garbage. So what does Trump do the next day? Trump then gets into a garbage truck with a garbage uniform, a sanitation uniform, driving a garbage truck with Trump 2024 on the side. But going back to Hinchcliffe, yeah, he has no place in the political process. And this outraged a lot of Puerto Ricans, the Puerto Rican community, outraged. And don't forget, in one of the key, Trump's not going to win New York, so that's completely out. He's not going to win New York. I mean, I know it was a last-ditch effort to try to gain popularity in New York, but it's not going to happen. Kamala Harris is going to win New York. So New York, I mean, they're lucky they made it out alive, put it that way, because New York has a huge Latino and Puerto Rican demographic. It is known for its Puerto Rican demographic. And, I mean, really, they were really stupid. So he's not going to win New York. But there are other states that are battleground states that he needs to win in order to win the election that do have a large Puerto Rican demographic. And one of those is Pennsylvania. So this could really cost them this comment. And since that time, other Puerto Rican celebrities like Fat Joe, Lisa showed me a clip, Fat Joe talking about Puerto Rico was trash. I mean, the comment that the guy made. Jennifer Lopez coming out and Nikki denouncing it, saying that she throws her support behind Kamala Harris. And then a couple of days ago in the rally in Las Vegas that Kamala was having, she spoke. Cardi B, who is not Puerto Rican but is of Latino descent, was hesitant to throw her support behind Kamala because she felt like, I'm a fan of Cardi. I follow her on Instagram. She felt like, she really, Nicky Jams, who many Americans don't know because he sings in Spanish. He's one of the pioneers of reggaeton. Lisa's absolutely right. But Cardi B, remember, she was all in for Biden. She did a podcast with Biden in 2020, and when he was running, she initially she was a supporter of Bernie Sanders, but then she switched her her allegiance to Joe Biden when Joe Biden won the nomination, and she did a podcast with Biden, one of the first podcasts of a celebrity being interviewed, of a presidential candidate being interviewed on a podcast by a celebrity. Now in 2024, it's the big thing. You know, Kamala, she's been on Club Shay Shay, she's been on Daddy's Calling, I think it's called, some female podcast. Um, Trump has been on The Undertaker's podcast. Trump has been on Rogan. Trump has been on Theo Von. Trump has been on Logan Paul. He's been on a lot of them. Kamala's been on quite a few of them as well. But in 2020, this was a new thing. You know what I mean? And Cardi was one of the first to have the interview with Biden. But over the course of Biden's presidency, Cardi felt betrayed. She felt like Biden wasn't doing the right thing. He wasn't living up to the promises that he made during his campaign. And she was hesitant to throw her support behind Kamala. But one of the things I think that really made her throw her support behind Kamala, besides the fact that women's issues are at the center and the precipice of this campaign on Kamala's side anyway. Trump's campaign is zeroing in on immigration, while Kamala's campaign is zeroing in on Roe v. Wade, was Trump's anti-Latino stance. You know what I mean? And yesterday she made a speech at a Kamala rally for her. So a lot of Latino celebrities, like Lisa saying, Nikki Jans initially supported Trump. J-Lo did not initially support Donald Trump, but she never supported any political candidate publicly anyway, and she refused to in 2008. 2008, when she was actually relevant, when she was actually really popular, one of the biggest stars of the 2000s, she refused to throw her support behind Barack Obama. Also, a lot of influential Latino celebrities tend to support Republican candidates. Besides George Lopez and John Leguizamo, who are staunch Democrats, we know that. Other Latino celebrities, especially in the music world, Daddy Yankee, Don Omar, they didn't support Barack Obama. They completely supported John McCain in 2008. You know what I mean? And Fat Joe is another hypocrite, because here he's coming out, like Lisa pointed this out, saying this about Trump because it attacks his community. But initially, he was all in on Trump's sneakers. You know what I mean? We covered that story on this channel. Now he's automatically going to say, well, it's because I'm a sneakerhead. I buy every sneaker. Fat Joe, if I walk into your sneaker closet, my boy, I better see every sneaker ever made, or else you're a fucking liar. You know what I'm saying? You don't have every sneaker. You're buying this specifically to support Trump. If I don't walk into your closet and see every sneaker ever made, you're a liar. You don't collect sneakers just because they're sneakers. You know what I'm saying? You knew there was a motive behind it, and you probably supported Trump from the beginning. But now, since it hits home, this is what I've always been saying about Fat Joe. You know what I'm saying? I've always been saying that he only aligns with the black community and other progressive causes when it suits him. You know what I'm saying? Like, the only time he's claimed allegiance with the black community really is I'll get to that, Lisa. Lisa asks, why does the Hispanic people support Republicans? The only time Fat Joe has aligned himself with the black community politically is when they question his ability or his right, as he puts it or as he sees it, to say the N-word. You know what I mean? If it's not, and we covered that back in like 2022 or 21 when they did the verses between him and John. He called Little Mo Crack here. We talked about it on this channel. I don't like Fat Joe. I don't fuck with Fat Joe. Even though I'm a Puerto Rican from New York, I don't fuck with Fat Joe because I feel like he's a racist. You know what I'm saying? I feel like he doesn't like really black people. You know what I'm saying? Like, we called him out on a lot of shit. We called him out on this channel on the 50-50 thing. We called him out on calling Little Mo a crackhead. We called him out on many, many things on this channel that was suspect. You know what I mean? That he's done that I don't like. You know what I mean? And this is one of them. It's like, okay, he can say this guy can say whatever the hell he wants to say about black people, about Black Lives Matter, and he could throw black people under the bus all day, and you don't have a thing to say. The peep comes out of your mouth, but as soon as he says something about Puerto Ricans, now you're ready to jump down his throat because it affects you personally. You know what I'm saying? And that, like, and and the black media is just as culpable in this, because I saw Angela Yee, DJ Envy, and Charlemagne the God sit there and give Fat Joe N-word pass after N-word pass, but they want to question Post Malone. When Post Malone was on the Breakfast Club, when he was first popping, oh, how do you feel like you have a place in hip hop when you don't speak about black issues politically? You don't support BLM. We never see you at a BLM rally. Well, I never seen Fat Joe at a BLM rally, but yet you give him a pass. You know, like, this dude really thinks he's somebody in hip hop. You know what I mean? They give him keys to the city. They make him the representative in the Yankee game. Like Lisa's saying, mediocre Joe. Like, you're not a legend. You're not a legend just because you've been around a lot. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you've been in the game since 1995, but how nice are you? Does anybody got Fat Joe in their top 5? No. He was only nice when Big Pun was writing for him. And as far as J-Lo, I guess she wants to align herself with the elites of the Democratic Party because she feels like maybe that'll help take some of the heat off of her for being closely involved with Diddy. Not to say that Trump wasn't, because he was too. You know what I'm saying? And Epstein. You know? And as far as what Lisa's talking about, why do a lot of the Hispanic voters vote Republican? And another reason I believe Fat Joe is a Republican, he's not only Puerto Rican, he is from New York, but he reps more Miami. He's also Cuban, and the Cuban community tends to vote more Republican. I think, Lisa, the way that the country is set up, legally on the census, a lot of Hispanic people mark the white category. You know what I mean? And what's going to eventually happen as the demographics start to shift and white Anglo-Saxon English people start to lose their demographic dominance in the country, what's going to eventually happen is they're going to start incorporating Hispanic people into the white category. You know, maybe not socially, like nobody is going to think of Hispanic people as white socially, but just for legal purposes and in things like voting and things like the census. Because the Hispanic category doesn't have its own category. You know what I mean? It's a mixed category. You know, it's ethnicity, and then you got to mark race under ethnicity: Black, African American, Native, Indigenous, or white / Middle Eastern / North African descent. You know what I mean? So that could be one of the exactly. Because we've seen this. This is a pattern in American history. In this country, when the country was founded, there was only 3 groups. 3. There was white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, basically from England, Scotland, and Wales, and Northern Ireland, the Protestant parts of England, right? And there was black people who weren't counted because they were considered slaves, and there was Native Americans who weren't counted because they were considered, uh, parts of other nations. You know what I mean? So over time, as other immigrants started to come in, starting with the Irish Catholics in the 1840s, and initially when the Irish Catholics came in the 1840s, they were not considered under the white category either. They were considered a third or fourth category. And then eventually, over time, as they became assimilated, even though they kept their religion, they began to be included in the white category. Likewise, in the 1880s and 1890s and early 1900s, when the Italians and later the Jewish people started to come in, they weren't considered white either. And eventually, over time, they began to be assimilated into the broader white category. So the point is, this is Uh, this has always been a thing. Lisa says Joe Biden apologized for calling Trump supporters garbage, but Trump didn't apologize for what the comedian said about Puerto Rico. No, because one of the things you got to remember, yeah, I mean, the Trump campaign denounced him, Lisa, they did. But one of the things you got to remember is that Trump's whole campaign hinges, like, both these campaigns are depending on basically one issue. For Kamala, it's women's rights and Roe v. Wade. For Trump, it's keeping the southern border secure. You know what I mean? So a lot of his rhetoric is going to zero in on immigration, on border security, border safety. And some of the things that this comedian said, he said it in a funny, insulting, crude way, but he said the quiet part out loud. He said the quiet part, what they don't want you to know, out loud. Lisa says he himself didn't. I'm not talking about the campaign. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he himself didn't. But the comedian fucked up anyway because Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Puerto Rican people are not immigrants. You know what I mean? But of course, that doesn't matter to him because, he's just racist. He thinks all Hispanics are the same. You know what I mean? So, but a lot of his campaign depends on his anti-immigrant stance. You know what I'm saying? Which again is nothing new in this country. But that's his main issue. Before, when he ran, that was kind of his issue. Like, that's how he started his campaign. Remember, Mexicans are racist. Mexicans are racist. They're rapists. They're coming across the border. But then as time went on and other things happened, such as the Pulse nightclub shooting, in which a lot of the victims was taking place in Orlando, and a lot of the victims were, of Hispanic descent, particularly Puerto Ricans, the campaign shifted from that to keeping the world safe from Islamic fundamentalism in 2016. You know what I mean? But on this front, we haven't had to deal with a lot of Islamic fundamentalism in the last 8 years. ISIS is pretty much non-existent, and outside of actual war with places like Iran, we're out of Afghanistan, so the heat is pretty much off of us. We're out of Iraq, so the heat is pretty much off of us when it comes to that. We haven't had to deal with that, so they have to zero in on something else. You know what I mean? Then the something else is dealing with these, luckily for them, this new gang, the Trente Aguaya gang from Venezuela started to pop up, and they started to take over places like Aurora, Colorado, and Trump can zero in on that. You know what I mean? As his lean in on that heavily. Lisa says we watched the rally and it was like a KKK rally. Yes, This, as soon as they said Madison Square Garden, I was like, automatically, it popped into my mind a 1939 rally that happened in Madison Square Garden. Because many people don't know this, but at first, Hitler, or Mustache Man, I don't know if I could say his name, but that Mustache Man, he was he was well liked by many people in the United States initially. This was 1939, so he had just come to power 6 years earlier, and many people in the United States liked his approach. They felt like he was a strong leader. They felt like he had turned Germany around because Germany had been in in a in a precarious position after losing everything, world during World War I and being punished for it by the two other European powers, France and Britain, in the Treaty of Versailles. So people in the United States liked him and they liked his approach, and they felt like it could work here. Particularly Fritz Kuhn, the founder of what was called at that time the German American Bund. And it was just German Americans, people of German descent in the United States here. But at the same time, a lot of other Americans that weren't German were attracted to it. And he had a huge, they had a huge rally in 1939 in New York City, attended by with thousands of people, and it broke out into a huge fight when the Jewish mafia, Jewish organized crime, led by the likes of Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky, started punching out uh, participants in it, and of course, defending themselves and sticking up for themselves. But the point is, this harkened back to that, and the Trump people knew that. They know the history of it. See, everything they do is strategic because it's a wink and a nod, guys. We all know what these dog whistles mean, but they can't outright say it, so they hint at it. They kind of like, and we know what this means, but we can't actually say it because we can't say the quiet part out loud. See, that's where Tony Hinchcliffe messed up for them, because he said the quiet part out loud. He said the part that they all want to say but can't, and he felt he could get away with it through humor. He could just diffuse the situation through humor, but obviously that didn't work. You know what I mean? Like the whole, we saw this in 2016. The whole hail our leader, hail Trump, and then Richard Spencer throwing up the Nazi salute, the OK sign. It's okay to be white. No, he didn't. Lisa's right. I was gonna say that. Lisa, they booed the joke because it wasn't funny, and Puerto Rico is part of the United States, so it doesn't really make sense that he would target them. Puerto Rico has been a part of the United States since 1917. The Jones-Faulkner Act, signed by President Woodrow Wilson into law, gave Puerto Ricans citizenship. Puerto Ricans on the mainland can vote, but Puerto Ricans on the island cannot. They have observer status in Congress. They can sit in session and hear about what's bound to happen to them, what's their fate, but they cannot vote. They have no say in who's going to be their leader, which is really fucked up, because you get to be my leader, but I can't choose you. I have to just take whatever people on the mainland say. And this is why many people are pushing for, Kamala Harris is one of them, pushing for filibuster and into the filibuster in Congress, which would inevitably lead to, many people feel, the introduction of two other states, two places that should be states, One is Puerto Rico and one is Washington, D.C. Now, both these areas, Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, are heavily populated by minorities. Washington, D.C. is majority African American, while Puerto Rico, of course, is majority Hispanic. So that would tip the scales in terms of electoral votes, and that would complete off the electoral college. So, of course, Republicans don't want that because in most elections, like look at the last 4 or 5 elections that we've had, Republicans have eked by when it came to the electoral college votes. So if you add 2 states that are more likely to be two states to the union and finally make it 52, the funny thing is many Americans will say how many states are there, and some people, the most ignorant people, will say, well, there's 52 states, even though there's only 50. But if you actually make it 52 by adding Washington D.C. and Puerto Rico as states and give them voting rights, then it would tip the scales in terms of voting because these states would most likely be Democratic states. You know what I mean? And then Republicans will want to add Israel to uh, be the 53rd, and then that will be a majority uh, Republican. I'm just joking. That probably won't happen, but Puerto Rico is likely to one day happen, as is Washington, D.C., to become a state. You know what I mean? But if the Union stays together in the next 50 or 60 years, who knows what will happen? You know what I mean? But they should have a right to say who's going to be their leader. Like, how I get a leader and I don't get to vote on it? That's stupid. You know, that's not fair. You know what I mean? I have to put up with whatever his or her policies are, and I don't even get to choose him or her. And for in 2017, ironically, the 100th anniversary of the time that uh, Puerto Ricans became official U.S. citizens, a major tragedy happened to Puerto Rico in the form of Hurricane Maria. And the Trump administration was very slow to act on that. The Trump administration uh, openly mocked the suffering of the people of Puerto Rico with Trump throwing bounty towels into the crowd. It was terrible, and no Puerto Rican celebrity from here, from the mainland United States or Puerto Rico itself, spoke up about it. You know, when I give Kanye West credit, like I was telling Lisa, I give Kanye West credit because, rightly or wrongly, whether you agree with Kanye West or you disagree with Kanye West on the things that he says, he always speaks his mind. And when it happened to the black community in New Orleans in 2005, we all remember the comment. We talked about it in the 2000 review video, where him and Mike Myers are standing there, and he goes, "George Bush doesn't care about black people," and nobody knew he was going to say that. You know what I mean? But it was true. George Bush was late to respond in Hurricane Katrina, and Trump was late to respond in Hurricane Maria. But no Puerto Rican celebrity, Fat Joe or J Lo included, spoke up about what was going on. And a funny thing is, they had the podium, they had the moment to do so, because not only was it the 100th anniversary of the Jones Act when Puerto Ricans became citizens, but it was also at that time Despacito, a reggaeton song in Spanish, was the most popular song of the year. Like, that's the song closely associated in my mind anyway with 2017. You know what I mean? So um, they had the moment to do it. They had this national tragedy. They had people's attention. Puerto Ricans and Puerto Rican music was in vogue that year, and they failed to do anything about it or speak up about it. You know what I mean? Any major Puerto Rican celebrity, and now they're all getting bent out of shape for what this guy said. You know what I mean? But Trump obviously didn't take it serious. He drove the garbage truck and everything. He made a joke of it. Whatever. But it could cost them dearly in some swing states where Puerto Ricans live. I mean, bad enough he spread rumors about Haitians. Saying that Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, are eating the cats and eating the dogs. you know, it's like his campaign needs a racist, xenophobic target in order to thrive. You need somebody to point the finger at. And I find it funny too that the Republican media is taking things that President Biden says serious. Because a couple months ago, when President Biden first dropped out of the race, people were like, "Oh, what he says doesn't matter. Joe Biden's, he's got dementia, early onset dementia. He doesn't know what he's talking about." But yet they're suddenly bent out of shape over this garbage comment. Seems weird to me. Once again, the MAGA crowd has proven to be that they're the real snowflakes. They can dish it out, but they can't take it. Lisa and I saw a thing in the Carolinas where this guy wore a "Let's Go Brandon" hat. And we know about "Let's Go Brandon," what it means. Again, another wink and a nod thing. Like, we know what it means, you know. And he almost punched out a pollster who was freaking a woman. You know what I mean? Like, they're getting out of control with the shit they're doing. God, pray for this nation. Pray that Kamala Harris wins the election. And if she is to win the election, that the Trump people behave. Because I feel like they thought they had it in the bag when they thought Biden was going to be the contender. But Kamala Harris comes along later on as a surprise entry, and now Trump feels like he's not prepared. On the Undertaker's podcast, he even compared it to like WWE switching out one opponent to another. I mean? He feels like he's not prepared to deal with her. I mean? He's clearly not, because now the tables have turned. Now she's older than him, and she can pull the youth and vibrancy card, and he can't because he's older. So pray if she does win, come Tuesday, that things are under control and the government is at least a little bit better prepared for dealing with this backlash of right wingers, because it will pale. Believe me, if they try to do something this time around in 2024, it will pale in comparison to what was done in 2021. Lisa saying, "Wow." Lisa, what did I say that was shocking? I mean, the Trump people are very dangerous. I mean, we have a right to fear them. What I mean? What they did in January the 6th, that's that's going to be nothing compared to this. What I mean? Bill Maher, Bill Maher on his podcast, he was talking with Dr. Phil, and of course, Dr. Phil's a MAGA guy, and Bill Maher is too, but he tries to like play both sides of the fence, but he doesn't want to admit it. But he's talking to Dr. Phil, and Dr. Phil saying, that MAGA is going to win, and but Bill Maher's predicting that MAGA is just going to, if they lose, they're just going to fade away into the darkness, and they're going to disintegrate. I don't think that's going to happen. I think uh, I think they're going to get worse, and they may nominate somebody They might feel like, okay, Trump's not young enough. He's not vibrant enough. He's not violent enough. And believe me, he's not even racist and xenophobic enough. We need to go even deeper, and we need to nominate somebody that's even worse and even more militant than Trump to be Kamala Harris in 2028. You know what I mean? It could get ugly. I mean, it can really get ugly in these streets because if people thought 2021 was bad, if people thought even the BLM people in response to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were bad in 2020, there's nothing compared to people armed with AK 47s, people that are gun nuts, these three percenters and groups like them that exist around the country that could do serious harm to people that are Kamala Harris supporters. Many of whom are women. You know what I mean? And these guys are misogynist. Many of them believe in justified SA, when women don't do what they do. So things could truly, truly get ugly in this country in the next 4 years if Kamala were to win. And if Kamala doesn't win, they'll get even uglier with a second Trump presidency because now he's emboldened. Now he feels like he has the political capital to do what he wants, to his and his followers to do as they wish. And it could turn really ugly for women in that regard. So, and it could, like Lisa and I were saying, it could split up families. You know what I mean? Like, say a husband votes one way and a wife votes another way. There are a lot of guys out there that uh, there are a lot of guys out there that are intimidating their wives to vote for Trump. What I think is going to happen though is we're going to see a surprise. A lot of, like in the polls, like Trump is winning in several key states, but polls don't really matter because when you go around and people ask you who you're going to vote for, you're going to say what you, depending on your geographical location, you're going to, Lisa says, everybody be safe out there on Tuesday. Depending on your geographical location, like if you're in the South or you're in the Midwest, the heavy Trump area, you'll say Trump, you'll cave under pressure publicly. Or same thing with New York. New York, California, liberal states. You're going to say Biden, Biden Harris, Harris Walls, because you're caving into political pressure, peer pressure. There's peer pressure for adults, just like there is for kids. You know what I mean? Yeah. So people say what they feel like the poll guy or the poll lady wants to hear, but in reality, in real life, behind that curtain, they're voting for who they wish to be. Lisa says on the View yesterday there was a commercial, and I believe in South Carolina, where the man says, "I know who voted for Trump," and she says yes. Meanwhile, she voted for Kamala. Kamala. Yeah, yeah. A lot of that is happening because, believe me, women, whether they're Republican or Democrat, uh, they don't want to lose their body autonomy. Like, this is serious for them. You know what I'm saying? No woman wants to be aped, God forbid, or molested, God forbid, by somebody, and then be forced to keep the molestation slash ape baby. Like, no woman wants that. Political opinions aside, no woman desires that. No woman will vote for that. You know what I mean? So this election is a lot more at stake for women than the Hillary election. You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe that there's any woman out there that wants to live in a world that is similar to the television show The Handmaid's Tale. Like, I watched that show, and I've also read the book by Margaret Atwood, and that's a horrific book, and that's a horrific It's a fantasy, it's a science fiction story, but as with many science fiction uh, works of science fiction, it depicts a future that is possible if something like, and you saw it in the movie or in the Hulu show, if you watch it or read the book, it happened overnight. Like we were living in a modern utopian society in a post-racial, post-prejudicial world, like in the Barack Obama years and whatever, and automatically it turned around just like that. Within the quickness, these radical Christian extremists gain power. We've seen it in our real lives, in real life countries like Iran, you know, where before the 1979 revolution, there's pictures, women wore miniskirts, women wore bikinis. You know, Iran was very liberal, Iran was very secular. And then overnight, the Islamists and Khomeini take power, and overnight they're in burqas. You know what I mean? Same thing in Afghanistan. Before the Russian invasion of Afghanistan that same year in 79, 80, during the communist years in Afghanistan, during the secularist years in Afghanistan, before the Taliban took power, women had freedom in Afghanistan. Women had rights in Afghanistan. Women had a society in Afghanistan. They could vote in Afghanistan. You know what I mean? So if it can happen there, it can happen here. You know what I mean? Our crazies are just as bad as their crazies. You know what I mean? Our crazies, our people, there are people here that I remember seeing it, it was a while ago. It was like 2016, like when Trump was first voting. The idea of white Sharia, the idea of taking not the Sharia law itself, you know, the corpus of the Sharia law, the specifics in the Sharia law, but the idea of Sharia law, especially suppressing the rights of women and applying it to Christian society. You know, doing the same thing they do in places like Iran, places like Saudi Arabia, and places like Afghanistan to women, we're doing it here. You know, within our society, having women, uh, you know, cover up, suppressing women. I mean, look, in the 60s and 70s, women couldn't own a home. They couldn't have credit cards without their husband's consent. You know, they couldn't really do anything. And people like people in the Trump campaign, the guys in the Trump campaign, see, because they feel, in a lot of them, like we talked about the podcast culture and the specific podcasts that Trump is going on. A lot of these podcasts that Trump is going on are the bro podcasts, quote unquote, broish podcasts. And what I mean by the broish kind of podcast, the Theo Vons, the Andrew Schultz, the Joe Rogans, especially these type of people, there's a whole, like, because of the way internet algorithms work, there's a whole list of this type of content. Like you watch one content creator and then it redirects you to another, and they're all interconnected, and they all podcasts that cater to men, right? And they cater to these men that are sexually frustrated, and uh, these men that feel left out by uh, the shift in economic dependence, because um, one of the landmarks that happened during the Barack Obama years was that more women went to work and more women entered the workforce than even men, and their incomes, of course, being more robust in the workplace, surpassed that of men. So men are now in the subordinate position economically than women, because even though they earn more, women have more job opportunities, especially in the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. So what developed, you know, during the later 2000s and the 2010s was this culture of men fighting back. Men's rights advocates started to be a thing. It started with uh, the PUAs, the pickup artist guys, and then from there transitioned, you know, to this broy type culture, and that's where you get guys like Andrew Tate, guys like John Zerka, Guys like again Joe Rogan appeals to this. You know what I mean? These type of misogynistic men who get online all day wishing that society was the way that it used to be, so they could have easier sexual access to women. You know what I mean? And you get these culture war conversations going. You know, I saw it all. I saw this. I saw the rise of these guys. You know, online in the late 2000s and late 2010s because I was in these circles, you know, talking with these type of individuals. I followed, you know, I saw the rise of like when Andrew Tate became popular, and the amount of following that Andrew Tate got online. And here's a guy, Andrew Tate, who was arrested and convicted for sex trafficking in Romania. You know, and then some of the early Andrew Tate, like before he became a Muslim, like the early Andrew Tate was uh, uh, very extremely misogynistic. Like he was over the board misogynistic. He got so misogynistic that they banned his mention of him in his home country of the UK. You know, and it just is different levels to it, but it all developed around the same thing. This whole idea of, oh, men got to fight back. So they might see Kamala Harris's ascension to the political office as symbolic. Like they feel like they got to really go out and really vote, really do some crazy shit because they're losing their hold on society. Uh, they're losing their hold on society. So and then, of course, you still have the racial aspect of it. You still have Kamala Harris, um, even though, you know, she's not, I feel like she's not as closely aligned with the popular, like, she's not so popular online in the same way that Barack Obama was in 2008. You know what I mean? Like, because she's already the vice president, you know what I mean? She's viewed as part of the establishment, whereas Barack Obama, who basically for a lot of people in 2008, if they didn't see uh, the speech that he made for Kerry in '04, for them he came out of nowhere. Like he was seen as a political outsider, only like 2 years in the Senate. You know, um, this says female turnout is higher than male turnout for early voting. I would imagine so, Lisa. Yes, because the seriousness of the stakes for women. I'm not on women's podcasts. I'm not in women's circles. I don't know what women are talking about. Not as much as I did in 2016. 2016, I paid closer attention to women's circles. You know what women were saying about Hillary. A lot of women didn't like Hillary because of her personal issues, the fact that she took Bill back. You know, many women perceive that as a sign of weakness on her part, you know, that she was putting up with infidelity or whatever. But that's not an issue here in this campaign with Kamala because she doesn't have that type of issues. You know what I mean? So she might be able to solidify the female base more than Hillary. You know, but Trump has the male base. Trump has a lot of the male base behind him, even the black and Hispanic male base. We didn't talk about it on the channel, but Barack Obama uh, basically scolded, uh, as it were, black men for not supporting Kamala Harris in the way that they supported him in the 2008 and 2012 elections. And that's what I feel about the black vote is like it's split. You know what I mean? Like the male black vote and like yeah. Yeah, at least I have you. At least a female, obviously, but I'm saying as far as like what other, I know Lisa's a loyal Democrat. She's going to vote for Democrats regardless. But I'm saying as far as like women who's are undecided voters, you know what I mean? I haven't really spoken or interacted with any of them, you know, in this election. But I feel like a lot of the black vote is divided along gender lines, man. A lot of men, a lot of black men feel that they don't have loyalty. You know, Kamala doesn't have the same loyalty to them as Barack. You know, and I think a lot of it, at least it says it doesn't impact it, but I think, my opinion, it does impact it somewhat that Kamala Harris's husband is white. You know what I mean? And they kind of feel like it's a betrayal. Like it's not a reflection of a black family in the same way that the Obamas were a reflection of the black family. You know, especially those that listen to the likes of Lord Jamar or the likes of uh, Umar Johnson. You know, those black nationalist types. Of course, they're not gonna get their people out there to vote for Kamala Harris. You know, maybe they're sexist, but on top of them being sexist, they also are, they don't agree with mixed marriages, and this is a huge thing for the black community. I often say in a hypothetical, if Barack Obama were married to a white woman and Michelle was white, if Michelle Obama was uh, Michelle Balkin, right, and she was white, would would black women have come out to support Barack in the same way? I'm talking about undecided voters, Lisa. Of course, you have your people like you that are very educated, that are heavily into politics, and you know what side you stand on, and that's going to be the side you're going to stand on regardless. But people that are swayed by this sort of superficialities, these sort of like, does this person identify with me? They probably wouldn't have voted for Obama in large numbers in the women's side if he were married to a white woman. You know what I mean? Because we know how sensitive this topic of interracial dating can be in certain spaces. And we've never had in this country ever a mixed race family in the White House, ever. You know what I mean? That would be something completely different for us in American history. You know what I mean? So we're only just adjusting to these sort of attitudes. Remember, Lisa, segregation only ended in 1964. 1964, that wasn't that long ago. You know what I mean? So we've never had these issues have never been on our plates before, where we've had to deal with this sort of thing. And we only had one black person in the White House, and that black person was married to another black person and had two black children. You know, and it was a reflection of the black family, whereas Kamala is not necessarily that. You know, in the minds of a lot of black undecided voters that don't have allegiances to either party. Now, it could sway them that it's Trump, and Trump is notoriously racist, and the Charlottesville thing, and him denying homes to black people in the 70s, he and his father, and he, Central Park Five, that could sway them. If it weren't Trump, maybe they would think differently. But it's like with the Jewish community. Okay, with the Jewish community, a lot of Jewish people, especially in the Northeast, right, New York, where I'm from, they're heavily Democrat, and they voted in large numbers for Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, but and for Hillary Clinton in 2016, and for Joe Biden in 2020. But with this Gaza situation and how the Democratic Party, members of the Democratic Party, entertain these radicals on college campuses that are pro Gaza. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being pro Gaza, because I support Gaza, I support Palestine, I support Palestine struggle or whatever, what have you. But this could impact uh, how Jewish voters view vis-a-vis Trump. They might feel like, okay, if the Democrats get in, they'll throw their support behind more of the radical elements of the Democratic Party, like the Squad, or like these kids on college campuses that are pro-Palestinian and anti-Semitic. Not everybody. I spoke about this before. Not everybody that is pro-Palestinian is anti-Semitic automatically. The conflation of being pro-Palestinian and being anti-Semitic is unfair. You know what I mean? But there are elements of the pro-Palestinian movement that are anti-Semitic. It's just like the MAGA movement. There are MAGA supporters that are not racist, that do support Donald Trump for various reasons, but they are not racist. But there is a huge element of the Trump MAGA movement that is racist, against Puerto Ricans, against blacks, whatever. And the same thing is true of the pro-Palestinian movement. Not everybody who's pro-Palestinian is anti-Semitic and hates Jewish people, but there's a large portion of them that are, anti-Semitic and do hate Jewish people. So a lot of Jewish voters might feel like, I got to throw my support behind Trump, even begrudgingly, even though I'm a Republican, because the left and the Democrats are so anti-Israel, like vehemently anti-Israel, to the point where they're not just anti-Israel, but they're anti-Jewish to begin with. You know what I mean? So that might impact his Jewish support. As far as his disabled support in the disabled community, I can't see anybody from the disabled community, even if they are a staunch Republican, voting for Donald Trump because of what he said about his nephew. How he proclaimed that his nephew, because his nephew was disabled, that he's better off dead. you know. But this election has been interesting each and every year that I'm alive. I've been following presidential politics and politics in general since I talked about it in the second grade. Bush and Clinton, the first 1992 election, the first one I followed, and each and every year they get more and more interesting. Each and every year they get more and more crazier. Celebrities are now involved, people that I never thought, that I grew up admiring, listening to, watching: Hulk Hogan, Cardi B, Fat Joe, this one, that one, Eminem. The funniest one was Eminem with uh, in Detroit. Uh, did we? I don't remember. At least I don't remember what he said about his nephew. Eminem in Detroit coming on introducing Kamala Harris, and then Barack Obama singing "Lose Yourself," the verses to "Lose Yourself," as the crowd just they love Obama, man. Like if I don't remember, at least I think we did. I'm not sure. I can't remember, but uh, if Obama was able to run for a third term, I think he would because like Eminem sang the song, and this is Eminem's home city, and Barack Obama got a bigger ovation than Eminem in Detroit. You know, and like I've never seen celebrities engage in presidential politics in the way that I see them engaged, now. Kelly Rowland's speech in Houston was spectacular. Cardi's speech um, last night, which I posted on my Facebook page, also also very good. Yes, Lisa brought that up. Trump says if he loses this time, he won't run again in 2028, which I don't think is wise anyway, because he is old. And if the Republican establishment throws their support behind him, then they're hypocrites because they call Biden too old. When we threw our support, we the Democrats threw our support behind Biden 4 years ago, and they call him old, too old. You know what I mean? So Trump is already wearing adult diapers. So yeah, uh, he's already geriatric. You know what I mean? So I mean, Obama did good with Eminem. Yeah. Funny, two guys from Detroit that started off together, right? Three acts from Detroit, the Detroit rap scene, that all started off kind of together, and like they were kind of coming out around the same time. ICP, which was out a little bit years earlier before Eminem, and Kid Rock and Eminem all find themselves on different sides of the political spectrum. Of course, ICP and their supporters, the Juggalo community, which is a very loyal community, um, in the music world, underground rap music world in Detroit, is with Kamala Harris, and of course Kid Rock is closely aligned with Donald Trump, as we spoke about, and Eminem, who started off with Kid Rock as friends. They kind of diverged politically against each other, and most people, some diehard Eminem fans, feel like, why is he getting so political? But I think it's because he has a daughter that's grown now, and she's of voting age, and he's she's dealing with issues. This election directly relates to women's rights, and I think this is what got him involved, politically, more so than he had ever been before. I know he was anti-establishment all the time, and people assume that he was Republican, right? But he never really was. You know what I mean? He when Obama first got elected, he commented that Obama was good. He liked Obama. He never really said anything about politics. After he came out with Mosh in 2004, obviously he was anti-Bush, right? But he kind of stayed away from politics and stayed away from the limelight because remember, he was going through a lot of problems in his own life. You know what I mean? Proof died in 2006. He almost died himself from an Ambien overdose in 2009. So he had his own issues going on where he wasn't really talking necessarily about any of this this other stuff going on in the world at the time during Obama's administration. But then, uh, he had the BET cipher that year, and he just dissed Trump, and he's been dissing Trump ever since. And like he is anti-Trump. And he talked about the Laquan McDonald shooting and also the Las Vegas shooting in 2017. You know what I mean? So he's different now. You know what I mean? And that's causing. Yeah, Lisa says she's pregnant. Haley, we know, is pregnant. It's funny because, like, it's just like with uh, the Obama girl, Sasha and Malia. It's like that's with Haley. Like we watched them all grow. We watched them grow up, into women. You know, and now they're adults. Stubborn, as President Obama says about his daughters, especially them wanting to distance himself from his legacy. Not that his legacy is anything wrong with that, but I think they just want to make it on their own. You know what I mean? But we watched these were kids, as we were coming up. These were all children, and now they're all grown women. And as Lisa said, Eminem's daughter's pregnant, and the way she introduced it to him was really funny. She gave him this jersey with grandpa on it, and he thought, oh well, she's just calling me old, right? But then he showed her the sonogram. I mean, he showed the sonogram. I mean, she showed the sonogram, and he's like, okay, yeah, now I get it. She was already pregnant at the wedding. I mean, that's why she said she didn't drink any alcohol at the wedding reception because she was already pregnant. But yeah, so many celebrities are weighing in on this. I never thought I'd see the day. I mean, like we said at the Trump rally, Hulk Hogan, he's still he's still doing his shtick. He's still doing his ear thing, and he said, "Brother, I don't see no stinking Nazis." Dr. Phil, like, who knew that Dr. Phil was a Republican? I mean, yo, yeah, I was so disappointed in Dr. Phil. What would Oprah think? Like, Dr. Phil, once for Oprah, nobody would even know who you were. Yeah, but they were playing all the hits, man. They were playing all the hits. I'm surprised they didn't drag Sarah Palin out there and have her give a speech, don't you know? No. But it's been real, guys. And remember what I said, and I said this in 2016 as well in 2020. Remember a quote from Abraham Lincoln that whoever wins, to remember, we're not enemies, we're friends. So, in other words, don't lose friendships, don't split your families over this. This is only an election and only lasts 4 to 8 years. And if you like Trump, good, and he wins, good. If you like Kamala and she wins, good. If you don't, you'll live. You won't die in the next 4 years, and you can vote them out if you want to. And Trump, you won't have a chance to vote out because that's it. If he wins, this will be the first time since 1892 that a president has been elected in two non-consecutive terms. And if Kamala wins, it'll be really history making for the reasons that I just stated, in addition to being the first female president ever in the United States. Um, Other countries have had female heads of state, even in the Middle East, Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan, Sheikh Husana in Bangladesh, Golda Meir, who we talked about a lot in this channel, in Israel, and of course, the Iron Lady Margaret Thatcher, uh, Reagan's bestie in the 1980s, who basically was England's version of Ronald Reagan, interacting a lot of conservative policies in office while she was there. So even though she was a woman, she was heavily conservative and she was against women in power. which was ironic as hell. But Margaret Thatcher in England from 1979 to the mid 1980s was the prime minister, and we've had another prime minister in English history, Liz Truss, who was the prime minister after Boris Johnson before Rishi Sunak. So we've had several women in power in several other countries, but we've never had it in the United States. Of course, the first time that a woman did run in an election, a major election, was in 1976, Shirley Chisholm, and in 2000, Carol Moseley Braun, the first black congresswoman, also ran that year in 2000. And of course, Hillary Clinton in 2016 were the closest it's ever come. But if Kamala Harris were to win, she'd be the third vice president to be elected to office within this century. The first was uh, George H.W. Bush, and of course Joe Biden, but he wasn't a sitting vice president, but he was a vice president. But she'd be the second in this century as far as a sitting vice president, following the footsteps of George H.W. Bush, who was elected in 1988, following his predecessor and his president that he served under, Ronald Reagan's 2 terms, which is George Bush's presidency was like Ronald Reagan's third term because he did the same things Reagan did from 88 to 92. Um, which would have been the same thing with Obama had Biden chose to run in 2016. Biden would have won and we wouldn't have had to deal with Trump. Trump wouldn't have existed, I believe. Uh, Lisa says, uh, people have to remember as well that the president is just a figurehead. They have to really vote for the Congress and the Senate to get stuff passed, so he or she can be law. That's the second person that's associated with Oprah. That's Republican because Lisa's right. Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, is also a staunch Republican and Trump supporter. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe Oprah. I know she supported Barack Obama, but that means nothing. A lot of Obama voters in the 2016 election flipped. Maybe Oprah, uh, Lisa saying that Dr. Lisa says, that's the second person that's associated with Oprah. That's Republican because the first was Dr. Oz, and then the show got canceled because of him being a supporter of Trump. Yeah. Um, Crazy. Mehmet Oz is a crazy person too. And RFK, let's just say RFK only switched party allegiances, a party that has been a part of his family since the 1930s. His grandfather, Joseph Kennedy Sr., served under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And of course, his uncle, JFK, was the first, the 40, uh, he was, I think it was the 36th president of the United States, I believe, elected in 1960, JFK. And his father, RFK, was so close to being the president in 1968. Um, and now he's switched allegiances just because Trump is going to give him a job in the cabinet as the health minister. Is it wise to elect Robert Robert Kennedy Jr., given that he is an anti-vaxxer? He's completely anti-vax, not just the COVID vaccine, but the entire vaccines in general. He's given to conspiracy. At least I read it, I think. The one about Dr. Oz was your second comment? It's coming across my screen a little late. I apologize. Oh, sorry, JFK was the 35th president. JFK was the 35th president of the United States. My apologies, not 36. Um, and that was, of course, RFK's uncle. And his other uncle, Teddy, ran in 1976 against Jimmy Carter. You can, a Democrat can challenge an incumbent Republican. I mean, a Democrat can challenge another Democrat. It hasn't happened in years because people have thrown their support behind Bill Clinton. They've thrown their support behind Barack Obama. And they've thrown their, well, not Biden, but Kamala didn't challenge Biden. But you can, if you're a Democrat. It happened twice in the 70s. Once to the Democrats with Ted Kennedy running against Carter, and another time in the early 70s in 74. I mean, 70s. No, also in 76. My bad. 76 with Reagan challenging Ford, who was the sitting president. So you can, two Democrats can, you can primary a sitting president within your own party if you feel it's necessary. It hasn't happened, like I said, in years because the Republicans and the Democrats both throw their support behind an incumbent. You know, the guy sitting in office there, they're running for re-election, but it can happen. It has happened in the past. You know what I mean? I'm surprised it didn't happen with Trump because there's a lot of people in the Republican Party that don't like Trump. You know what I mean? But I guess people are just too scared, and there's nobody that they feel could win. Because the most charismatic person that they've got is Vivek, and Vivek, in many ways, is just as crazy as Trump, and he's a huge Trump supporter. Like he's kissing Trump's ass because I believe that Trump promised him some kind of cabinet position as well. All these people kissing Trump's ass, Trump promised them some kind of cabinet position. Believe me, you know, what I mean? And that's why they're doing it. You know, if Trump wins again and Bob Woodward comes out with another book, we'll see the truth behind the Trump second presidency. Because Bob Woodward, man, he's been doing this since Watergate. His books are tremendous. If you really want to get, if you're really a political science or politician or U.S. history nerd like I am, and you really want to get a look behind the scenes, because I love behind the scenes shit, whether it's wrestling, whether it's TV shows I watch, whether it's politics. Tell me this part of the story that we don't see, that we don't know. The political Disney stuff, you know, Disney movies too. Tell me the part of it where we don't see. Tell me the part of it that's behind the scenes. I love that. And for politics, Bob Woodward, for many use a wrestling reference that many wrestling fans will get and understand. He's the Dave Meltzer of politics. He's the guy that will dig in the dirt and tell you the real to real. You know, what I mean, he's an investigative reporter, and his books are tremendous for that. You know, his book on Obama's war on the Obama administration. I think the first one. I don't know if he didn't. I don't think he. The one I read covered both of them together. But like he's the one that said that Biden was the one in favor. Biden was in favor. Biden and Obama, they got along pretty good. But one of the things they disagree with, Biden was in favor of pulling out of Afghanistan. Obama was not. You know what I mean? And of course, during Biden's administration, that's exactly what he did when he got the power. You know what I mean? But we know Pence and Trump did not get along at all. JD Vance, seems to get along with Trump, but you never really know. It could be all phony shit too. It could be bullshit. You know what I mean? But uh, it'd be interesting to see, uh, what these presidencies are like. When the cameras turn off, the part we don't see, and we're heading into a new world in American politics and global politics, geopolitics, because North Korea is a huge threat, and they know what they're getting with Trump. They've dealt with Trump. Kim Jong Un has dealt with Trump before, and Trump even said it. I think it was on the under. I think it was on the Undertaker's podcast. The interesting thing about the Undertaker's podcast is that uh, Lisa says, "Do I think Kamala Harris? I think Kamala Harris will be kind of. I don't know, Lisa. I can't call it because she's kind of not liked by the press like Trump was not liked by the press. So it may be exciting. I don't know. Biden's presidency would have been more exciting if Biden was old Biden. Like if Biden was Biden the way Biden was in the 70s, or Biden was in the 80s, or Biden was in the 90s, or even when Biden ran in 2008 when he primaried against Obama. Uh, uh, yeah, the media loves Trump. I mean, they act like they don't, but the media to Trump is like a girl that or a person that picks on you in school, and they act like they hate you and they bully you, but in reality they can't live without you. They love you. They really love you. You know what I mean? And that's the way, because he's been in the man has been in the media since forever. You know what I mean? There's a lot of real estate people in New York. There's a lot of real estate guys and women that are rich in New York. But how many of them do you know their names? How many of them can you identify on the street? Donald Trump has been known by the mainstream media since the 80s. He was people say, well, why do they reference him so much in rap songs, right? Uh, and everything, because when you said his name back in the day before he got into politics, that was the synonym with being rich. I want to be rich like Trump. You know what I mean? Because he presented that lifestyle. So the media has been in love with him since forever because he's from New York. He's a New Yorker. He has that New York attitude. You know what I mean? So, and think of history. Think of the politicians that we remember. There are those with the charismatic, bombastic attitudes. They're not those. We don't remember the John Tylers. We don't remember the John, uh, uh, the James Buchanans, the Millard Fillmores. We don't remember those guys, right? We remember the JFKs, the FDRs, the Lincolns, the Reagans, the Obamas, the great big personalities, not the regular, normal, everyday, average Joes. The Andrew Jacksons, like Andrew Jackson was the first president in American history to be that. He was the Trump of the 1800s. You know what I mean? Like he was not from the political establishment. He was not one of the founding fathers. He was from the frontier in Tennessee. He bucked the system. He engaged in duels. He got shot and survived it. And he was he was a he was a cowboyish, and the founding fathers that were still alive, like Jefferson at the time, hated him for it, and his opponents hated him. They formed a whole political party against him, and also Andrew Jackson, also in the 1824 election against John Quincy Adams, claimed that he lost the election to Quincy Adams in the closest election in American history up to that point. And he went on the papers and he claimed that there was a corrupt bargain taking place between John Quincy Adams's party and the political establishment to keep him out of the presidency. The same thing that Trump did in 2020. The exact same thing. Like history repeated itself. Jackson, he was called a racist. Jackson was called a hillbilly. Jackson was called an outlaw, a scoundrel, a scallywag by the mainstream media at that time. Television didn't exist, radio didn't exist, but print media, newspapers. So Andrew Jackson was the exact same as President Trump. He was the Trump before Trump. And Jackson was so beloved by the American people that when the Civil War broke out years and years later, like 30 years after he'd already left office, people said, you know what? I wish Jackson was still alive. Because of the nullification crisis of the 1830s that kept South Carolina from seceding when Johnson was president. Lisa says Biden calling Trump supporters garbage. That was the old version of Biden. Yeah, that was the real Biden. And Jackson was so good, going back to Jackson, he was so good and beloved by the American people that his vice president, Martin Van Buren, got in, and Jackson was called Old Hickory, and Van Buren was called Young Hickory. Van Buren was the first vice president to be elected to be the president after the man he served under was done with his 2 terms. And Van Buren was actually the first president to be born after independence. So he was really the first American president, if you look at it like America starting from 1776 onward. And of course, Andrew Jackson is the founder of the modern day Democratic Party, as many people know. That's why even today, the dinner that Democratic delegates get together and they honor their candidates is called the Jefferson and Jackson dinner. Even though both Jefferson and Jackson, their politics don't necessarily align with the modern day Democratic Party, but it's a nod to history, the history of the party. That's why the Democrats have the symbol of the donkey, because Jackson was called by the papers a jackass by some of his detractors. So they put the donkey as the symbol of the Democratic Party, the party that he founded out of protest. because he felt the party at the time, which was the dominant party at the time, was the Democratic Republican Party, which was the party that Jefferson founded. Because initially, during the American Revolution, there were no political parties. George Washington was against political parties. He felt that he saw him and all the founding fathers, they were students of history. So they saw how republics, like the Roman Republic, for example, disintegrated, how democracies, like the Athenian democracy in Greece, disintegrated. You know what I mean? And they didn't want, and they saw the political fractions that are going on in their own, the country of their heritage, not the country of their birth, but the country of their heritage, England. And they didn't want that to happen to the United States. So a lot of them were against political parties. But the origin of political parties stems from the fact that Hamilton and Jefferson were enemies and they thought completely differently. Hamilton believed that even though we were fighting against a strong centralized government and he didn't want a monarchy necessarily, like England had, even a constitutional monarchy by that point, he felt that a strong centralized government was the only thing that could keep the country together, whereas Jefferson thought that a decentralized government was necessary, that the state should have more power than the federal government. And that's where they disagreed. And add to that, a conflict was raging at the time, like it always was in most of European history, between France and England. And Jefferson favored the Jacobins, the perpetrators of the French Revolution, and Hamilton favored more of a temperable English attitude. So Hamilton would be considered today. Hamilton would be considered a liberal. More in his political attitudes would be more in line with the modern day Democratic Party, and Jefferson's ideas of small government, limited government, will be more in lines with the modern day Republican Party. But the parties were different back then. They were different all the way up until 1968. They switched sides. Hamilton founded the Federalist Party, which was the Federalist Party, and Jefferson founded the Democratic Republican Party. But after the War of 1812, because they felt that John Adams, and Trump actually referenced John Adams's act, one of John Adams's acts as president. John Adams was also a vice president that was president also. So it wasn't Van Buren, it was actually John Adams. But anyway, John Adams, Trump referenced one of John Adams's acts, the Alien Sedition Act, where John Adams, when he was the second president of the United States, he locked up basically anybody that spoke against his administration. Like, he was very dictatorial. If he could have, I think he would have returned the country to monarchy if he had that power. Like, he was very dictatorial. One of the most dictatorial presidents that we've ever had in American history. So, but his ineffectiveness to deal with English impressments on American ships, which inevitably led to the Second American Revolution, the War of 1812, people lost faith in the Federalist Party, and the Federalist Party just faded away, and the Democratic Republicans not dominated until the corrupt bargain situation in the 1820s, where they broke into and Jackson founded the Democratic Party. And of course, Jackson's opposition was called the Whig Party, after the conservative Tory party in England. The Whigs, what happened to them was a lot of their supporters and constituencies in the 1860s were in the North, but a few were in the South. And the northern faction and the Southern faction split, and the Southern faction became the Cotton Whigs, and the Northern faction left the party, and they founded in the 1860s the Republican Party. And the sole mission of the original Republican Party was the abolition of slavery. You know, not even the just to stop the westward expansion of slavery, like Lincoln was for a gradual abolition. Many many in the Republican Party, such as Thaddeus Stevens, who Thaddeus Stevens was brilliantly played by um, Tommy Lee Jones in the Lincoln biographical movie made by Steven Spielberg in 2012, which me and my fiance saw. But he was more. They were more radicals, right? And they want to completely abolish slavery even in the South. But most Republicans, but that was the point of the Republican Party initially, was the abolition of slavery. So of course the Republicans at that time, they were more liberal and the Democrats were more conservative. And then what eventually happened is after slavery was over, after the Civil War was over, 1865, Republicans uh, occupied the cities, and they got into business and industrialization, and they became the party of the business people, whereas Democrats became the party of labor, especially after the 1906 election, the 1912 election, because Roosevelt comes out of retirement out of nowhere. Theodore Roosevelt was initially a Republican. He comes out of nowhere in 1912, challenges both uh, William Howard Taft and Woodrow Wilson. But his party does nothing in 1912, and then uh, eventually a lot of his platforms with regards to labor and with regards to business reform, being a monopoly buster, get adopted by the Democratic Party, and of course they then become the party of labor, especially by the time his cousin Franklin Delano Roosevelt becomes president in the 1930s. And since that time, that's what the Democrats have been. But there was, again, with the Democrats, as the Democrats became more liberal, there was other wings of the Democratic Party, the northern wing and the southern wing, and the southern wing was always segregationist in the northern wing. And we talked about it, the split during the 48, the convention in 48, where Strom Thurmond challenged the president at that time, Harry Truman, and they broke away with the Southern Manifesto. And they remained in the Democratic Party, the Dixiecrats, up until 1964-65 with the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act. So that's just a brief completely off topic, but that's a brief overview of the history of the political parties in the United States. Anyway, guys, peace. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And again, a famous presidential quote: ask yourself, are you better now than you were 4 years ago? And if you are, I guess vote for Kamala. And if you're not, vote for Trump. Peace. Love you guys. Thank you, Lisa, for contributing.